So next topic that we're going to discuss about is inheritance. Now, if we talk about inheritance, if I show you the PDF, inheritance can be defined as the process in which one object acquires the property of others, right? So here we are talking about object. It could be like a class B acquires the property of class A, right? So how they're going to acquire the property, we're going to discuss about that thing in detail. But here, when a class B is acquiring the property of class A, then class A becomes the parent class and class B becomes the child class, right? By using inheritance, the information becomes more manageable and in a hierarchical order. Like you can see over here, vehicle, then car, then racing car, right? So this is like forming up a hierarchy over here, right? In other words, we can say that inheritance is nothing; it's just a relationship between a superclass and a subclass, where subclass is represented as a child class, or a superclass is represented as a parent class over here, right? So subclass actually inherits the property of a superclass. Then this is what like a diagrammatical difference in a superclass and a subclass. A superclass is the class which contains common features of all subclasses, and subclass is which it inherits the features of a superclass, right? So if you see over here, the super class is an animal class, and this cat, dog, and elephant, these are subclasses. And where you can see at the tail of this arrow, right? Tail is represented towards the superclass, and rest where we don't have the tail. Like the end of the arrow is basically the subclasses, right? And the relationship between the subclasses and the parent class is basically is a relationship. Now, what is a relationship? We're gonna discuss about this thing in detail once we start studying inheritance, right? So I'm gonna create a new class for inheritance. I'm gonna go over here and create a new package. Say inheritance, and then we're going to create a class. So I'm going to create a class inheritance example, right? So how to use inheritance? Inheritance relationship is created by using extends keyword. So this is what the keyword we're going to use in case when we are defining inheritance, where this arrow is basically a head, right, and this is basically a tail, right? So wherever we have the head, that is basically a superclass. So a parent is called as a superclass in case of Java, right? Parent, when you're calling it as a parent class, that's a layman language. So we're going to call it as a superclass. And wherever we have the tail, those are the subclasses in case of inheritance, right? So let's take another example. Let's say we are a child, and let's say we are not earning at the moment. So we are completely dependent on our parent for our daily expenses, for our travel, for our food, everything we are dependent on our parents, right? And once we start earning, so it again depends whether the parent will be dependent on us or not. But in case of Java, a child can be dependent on parent, but a parent cannot be dependent on child. Means a child can inherit the properties of parent, but a parent cannot inherit the property of Java of a child in Java. So in inheritance, we have a bottom to top approach, not top to bottom. A child can inherit the property of a parent, but a parent cannot inherit the property of a child. This is not at all feasible in Java. For example, let's say if you are a child, right, and you're feeling hungry, so you'll take money from your parent, right? But ultimately, who will be using that money? The child itself will be using that money, right? So similarly, in case of inheritance, if you are acquiring some property of a parent, right, the action is actually performed by a child, right? The object that will be created will be of a child only, right? So don't get confused over here. So it means if there are, let's say there are two classes, right, and having a method show in a class A, and a class B wants to call that method. And if a B is a child class, so child can simply call that method, but the action that will be performed is of that child only. The action will not be performed of that particular parent class, right? We are not going to create an object of a parent class in child class and then call the method, right? So this is what we need to understand when we're working on inheritance, and I'll gonna explain this thing in depth once we practically start writing some code against it. So in inheritance, the object will always be of a child class, and the property will be of a parent class. Right. Now let's talk about the available types of inheritance. Right. Type of inheritance. So if I talk about inheritance, you may have heard about single inheritance, multiple inheritance, right? Or it could be multi-level, right? It could be hybrid. You may have heard about something called as hierarchical, right? See, in case of Java, the inheritance are actually applied at two level, either the class level or the interface level. So in Java, there are some keywords. Basically, if you talk about a class can inherit a class, or an interface can inherit an interface. A class can inherit an interface, and when a class it inherits a class, or an interface it inherits an interface. Then which keyword do we use? We use the keyword as extends. So the type is same, class and interface. And when a class it inherits any interface, then which keyword do we use? We use a keyword that is implements. And it will never happen that an interface will gonna inherit a class. This is never possible. So whenever a type is similar for parent and child, then we use extends, and whenever a type is different, we use implements. So what all types amongst this are possible at class level? So what possible is a single inheritance, multi-level, and hierarchical. Right. So multiple is not possible at the class level. It is actually possible at the interface level. It can be achieved via interface only, right? And it cannot be achieved via class level, right? So what is hybrid? Hybrid is a combination of a multiple inheritance and other inheritance. So hybrid cannot be achieved using the class level as well. And in at interface level, we have these three already there, and the other one that we have is multiple. So at interface level, we have four feasibility, four types of inheritance that are possible, and at class level, we have three type of inheritance which are possible. We're going to talk about these single multi-level in detail. What are these actually? So we're going to look at it one by one, and initially we're going to start with the class level itself. Now let's understand the single inheritance first. Now what I'm going to do, I'm going to create a new class over here. and give this class name as animal, right? Now, animal could be any class which contains some methods like a method like sound, right? Uh, and if you call this method, then it will going to generate some sound. Generate sound, right? Similarly, I can create another class with the name as dog, right? Now, dog wants to generate some sound, right? If I talk about dog, then dog is a animal, right? So is a relationship between a dog and an animal class, right? So if in case a dog wants to generate the sound, dog cannot directly like have a method, call a method that is sound. We cannot directly say dog obj equal to new dog, and we cannot directly access the method from dog object that is sound. We should not be able to access it, right? So there has to be some relationship between a dog and an animal, right? That is basically a dog should be like a child class. Animal is basically a parent class, right? A sound is like a generic method. Even a dog can access the sound. Even a cat can access the sound, right? So a sound is like a generic method that a class, the parent class that is animal it holds, and dog wants to access the property of the animal class, right? So in order to access that, we need to add a keyword over here. That is what extends is. So extends is for inheritance, right? So a child class, if it wants to extend, if it wants to inherit the property of a parent class, that can be done with the help of extend keyword. So if I write dog extends animal, then the issue will be resolved. Then dog should be able to access the property of animal. If you can, if I run this, it will gonna generate the sound. Now you can see while I have extended this animal class, dog can extend the property of dog can use the property of animal class, but the object that is created is of the dog class and not the animal class. Why we have not created object of animal class? Because animal, I mean the sound that has to be generated has to be generated by dog. Dog wants to generate a sound, animal does not wants to generate a sound, right? So that is the reason object that has been created is of the dog class and not the animal class. Because if I write animal over here, I can write animal over here as well. Animal obj equal to new animal. Then now who is generating the sound? Is dog generating the sound? No, dog is not generating the sound. Right? It's animal who is actually generating the sound. And we want that the dog should generate the sound. So the object has to be always of the child class. And child will gonna inherit the property of a parent class. So what sort of inheritance is this? Let's say if I go over here and the relationship that we have seen over here, there is a class that is an animal class, and then we have a dog class, right? So this is uh, animal class, this is dog class, and dog is actually taking the properties from the animal class, right? So this animal becomes a parent class or a super class. So this will act like a super class or a parent class, and this will be a subclass or a child class. And if we talk about the relationship, it's like one-to-one relationship, child to parent relationship. And if we talk about this level, it is actually called as a single level inheritance, where one single child inherits the property of one single parent. And now let's create another class over here. Let's say I create a class called as cat. Now, cat also wants to generate a sound, right? So, cat will also gonna inherit the property of an animal class, right? We're gonna do it something like this, extends animal, right, to this class as well. So the object will be created is of the cat class itself. So cat will also be uh, generating the sound with the help of its parent class. So cat will become the child class and parent class will be the animal class. So if I talk about a relationship now, right, the way that we have seen a single level inheritance, if I again open a paint, so this time it is like we have one parent class and two child class. So parent class is like animal class and child classes are dog and cat, right? Where the child inherits the property of a parent. So wherever you have a head of this arrow, that is basically a parent class, a super class. So animal over here is a super class and dog and cat are subclasses or a child class, right? So whenever a parent have multiple child classes or a super class have multiple subclasses, this sort of level is an interface in inheritance is actually called as hierarchical inheritance, right? Where a parent has got multiple childs, so those are basically hierarchical inheritance. Now let's take another scenario. I'll create another class, my interface. I'm going to create another class called as bulldog, which is another type of a dog, right? And now bulldog also wants to generate some sound. So, which is the nearest parent class to bulldog? Will it gonna take the sound method from animal or from dog? So dog is the nearest one, right? So it will actually gonna extend the dog class, right? And if I want to generate a sound from bulldog class, so I'm going to create an object of bulldog. Now tell me if I call, will I be able to access the sound method from an animal class? Because animal is not a direct parent of bulldog, right? Animal is a parent of a dog class and dog is a parent of a bulldog class. So if I say obj dot, I should still be able to access the sound, right? So there is something, if I show it to you over here, there is something that is called as inheritance tree. A child can access the property of any parent in the hierarchy starting from the root, right? Not just not like if I talk about bulldog, it can not only access the property of dog, it can access the property of a mammal, it can also access the property of animal or the topmost hierarchy a thing, the last child in this hierarchy can access the property of the root parent as well, right? So this is what inheritance tree it talks about. So we that is the reason we are able to access the sound property from the animal class, which is the super class of all these classes. Now if I draw another diagram over here, it will be like this. So we have a parent, we have two children to that parent, and one child to this parent, this children, right? So it will be like this, where animal is a parent, cat and dog are child to animal, and bulldog is a child to dog. So if we talk about this sort of hierarchy, this is this level is called as multi-level inheritance. So this is what not multiple. This is what multi-level inheritance is. Now, again, if I talk about this thing as well, this is not completely multi-level. If a child has got two parents and then if a parent has got two child and then another like sub parent or this child they have got more child, then this is actually a hierarchical. This is not a multi-level. A multi-level will form when I remove this thing. When this is a separate entity, right? And a parent and a child and a subchild. So this is what multi-level inheritance is. If in case I form a relation in cat and animal as well and a dog and animal as well, this is what hierarchical is. This is not multi-level. Multi-level is just one parent having one child, another child having another child. If any hierarchy is being formed, then that will be hierarchical inheritance and not multi-level inheritance. All right. So don't get confused over here. So multi-level is when we have one parent, one child, and then another child to that particular child. And hierarchical is when we are forming up a hierarchy like this. Although these things are just for your reference, no one will actually gonna ask you these things in interview. Right. The only question related to inheritance you may gonna face that why multiple inheritance is not feasible in Java. That we actually gonna look at it practically. That why multiple we cannot achieve multiple inheritance in Java. Or is there a way we can achieve multiple inheritance in Java? So let's come back to the inheritance tree over here. Now, just a minute. So if I talk about, let's say if you take a look at this tree, if I talk about this, let's say Great Dane class, right? So how JVM actually works. So JVM will first gonna look at the functionality inside the Great Dane class. Let's say if there is a method sound, which is there in a dog class, a mammal class, animal class, and anything class as well. So first of all, JVM will gonna look whether that sound method is coming from a Great Dane class or not. If Great Dane class is not having that sound method, it will look for the dog class. Right. Very next parent, the parent of the Great Dane class is the dog class. So it will actually gonna look at the dog class. And if the sound method is there in mammal class and dog class, both the classes, and if we are calling the sound method in Great Dane, so which will be called mammal or dog, it will actually gonna call the method from the dog class and not the mammal class. And if the sound method is not there in dog, then it will gonna call the sound method of a mammal class. So this is how JVM will actually gonna work. So let's understand this practically. Let's say if I go over here to the dog class, right? Now this sound is a generic method. This is a generic sound. Now dog may have his own sound, right? So we can create a functionality of generating sound inside the dog class as well. So here the sound will be specific to dog. So let's say the dog, how like it sounds, it's like something like this, right? Now, if I run this now, whether the sound method will be called from the animal class or whether it will be called from the dog class. If I run this thing now, this will be called is from the JVM will first gonna look at the dog class and then it will gonna look at them. If there is no sound method over here, then it will actually gonna call the method from the animal class. Same way, if I go to the child class that is bulldog, and if I run this now, the sound that will be generated is of the parent class. Right, and if the parent is not having this method, then it will gonna generate a generic sound. So this is how the inheritance tree it actually works. So again, it means that if a child is earning money, he cannot use the money of his parent, right? So your entire oops is actually dependent on this logic, right? Whatever that we have discussed right now, this is just a basic syntax of inheritance, but this is very important, very important. Your entire oops is actually dependent on these concepts. Now, the interview question that comes is why multiple inheritance is not possible. Now, before that, we should understand what multiple inheritance is. So, if I go over here, multiple inheritance means a child is having multiple parents. Something like this is a child class, and this is parent 1, and this is parent 2, where child is actually accessing or extending the properties of two parents. This is what multiple inheritance is. So Java, it does not support this at the class level, right? For example, let's say I take up example. Let's say this parent, this has got a method called as sound. Another parent has also got the same method as sound. Now, child wants to access the sound method. Now, what we're gonna do? We're gonna create an object of new child, and then we're gonna call the method as sound. So, which method JVM will gonna call? Whether it will gonna call the method from a parent one or parent two. So here is where the ambiguity will gonna come. JVM will gonna get confused over here, right? So JVM will not gonna do okay, execute parent one method first and then execute the parent two method, right? It will not gonna decide this thing on runtime, and we're gonna see some error over here. So you're actually gonna get a runtime error. It's I mean compile time error itself. So where I mean you cannot do it something like bulldog extends dog and extends cat, right? You can not even write like this extends cat. You're gonna get a compile time error itself, right? So this is not at all feasible in Java. Although there might be a chance that sound method is present only inside parent 1 and it's not present inside parent 2, but nothing works on chance in case of a programming language, right? So that is the reason Java has not allowed multiple inheritance, right? It's not a question of taking a chance. This is why I mean like when it's been asked in interviews that why multiple inheritance is not feasible. So this is the answer that like if both the parent shares the same like if there are more than there are many parents, a child is extending many parents, and if a parent has got the same method, then at the time of execution the JVM might get confused, and there is a chance of ambiguity at that point of time. So that is the only reason multiple inheritance is not feasible in Java. All right. So that is what your inheritance is. So far, we have just looked at the syntax of inheritance. We have not seen the purpose of using inheritance. That we're gonna look at in our next lecture. All right.